Feel like being one of the cool kids? Want that girl to finally notice you? Or do you need a good disguise to wear for when you rob your next liquor store? Want those bullies to finally stop picking on you? Get your official WWF merchandise now. Only available at WWFshop.com. Clothing may contain traces of dead cockroaches, mice, bats, snake venom, World War II veterans, Ebola, AIDS, plutonium, and human feces.
World Wrestling Federation.
There was just no direction.
I was young and dumb.
I could not believe what I was seeing.
No wonder why the fans absolutely loved him.
Got pissed off and wanted to get back at John.
I wanted to quit the wrestling business that night.
Then in May '91, I was suddenly cured.
It can't be denied that this was the most amazing event ever.
We were all afraid they were both seriously injured.
Wow, what a great night.
I made that dream come true.
I said, fuck you, I'm leaving.
The better man won that night.
We had to find a way to make sure this would never happen again.
I just could not believe my eyes.
We needed to make sure there wasn't going to be another riot.
The WWF was founded and created by Mac Laurinaitis back in 1979. There were no televised events, no merchandising, and there was very little exposure. Mac Laurinaitis did not see the potential to grow business, so he organized and created events as a pastime hobby, as wrestling was one of his deepest passions.
There was just no direction, like, at all.
One day you're in the spotlight, the next day you're nobody. But then the day after that, you're a superstar. It was just really hard to keep up.
Look, it was great fun, but I don't think I ever actually got paid. I was young and dumb.
I saw it as an opportunity. I knew I had the talent to deliver, and that's exactly what I wanted to do.
In 1986, Mac Laurinaitis had passed away. His son, John Laurinaitis, had no contact with Mac throughout all of his life. It was to John's surprise he had discovered that he had inherited the business. John had no intention to continue running the business, as he wasn't a fan of wrestling. But when he saw a live show with his own two eyes, he was mesmerized. The glamour, the atmosphere, the screaming fans, and the incredible athletes were just the few things that changed John's idea. What he could now see was potential. Potential to not only continue his late father's business, but to expand and make a lot of money.
He just took that ball and he ran with it, man. We knew big things were coming.
He created the WWF Championship, and he said to me, Lance, I want you to be our champion. I want you to be the face of the company. So at our next show, I want you to show the world what you've got. I was so honored.
On the 11th of July, 1986, in front of over 3,000 fans, was the first event John ever created. He did not know how it was all going to go. To him, it was Judgment Day, which is exactly what he called the show. Due to WWF's limited roster, Judgment Day would only feature a few matches. This event had premiered the tag team titles, with the Brotherhood defeating the Filthy Amigos, the United States title, with Jacob Cassidy defeating Turk. And of course, the WWF title in a four-man tournament, featuring Sean Lucky, Navajo Black, Buddy Thorne, and Lance Starr.
I could not believe what I was seeing. I did not care that we would lose. It was just amazing to be there with my best friend, Senior Blaze. May God rest his soul.
I mean, I was the first ever WWF champion. What more could I have asked for? It was an amazing night. He had plans for me to reach the stars. That's actually how I came up with my name, Lance Starr.
Win, lose, it did not matter. The fans absolutely loved it, and we all had such a great time. Judgment Day was such a huge success, and I just knew it was an unstoppable money train.
Although Judgment Day was a huge success, it had one massive problem. Jacob Cassidy took the United States Championship belt and joined RFW. Real fucking wrestling.
I don't know what he was thinking. Just one of the worst things anybody could ever do. Not just to John and the business, but to the fans.
Jacob Cassidy is one of the biggest pieces of shit in the wrestling business, and I'm so glad I had the privilege to beat the shit out of him at SummerSlam 6. You don't just take a title belt that does not belong to you and take it to another organization. Even if you do return it several years later, you just don't do that.
What was I thinking? Well, that's a good question, because I clearly wasn't thinking. I found out I got paid substantially less than other superstars that weren't title holders. And I don't know, I guess I just got pissed off and wanted to get back at John.
And why exactly did you choose to come back to the WWF with the United States title?
It wasn't exactly me choosing to, as much as it was me needing to. I sold my soul to the devil. The WWF allowed me to perform at Clash of the Champions in '91 and at the very first WrestleMania with Bret Hart, and I don't know why. It was so damn awkward. And I guess over time the guilt caught up to me, and I just knew I had to do the right thing.
He's a lying asshole, and he knows exactly why he did what he did. To embarrass John. That's it. The only reason he came back to the WWF was because RFW was declining at the time and he needed the money.
I guess not a lot of people know this, but Jacob wasn't in the greatest place at that time. He was pissed off at John, and the painkillers being prescribed to him were questionable. Those kind of things will fuck with anyone's mind, you know?
I believe that John brought Jacob back in to appear as a guest, to humiliate him, to let him face the awkwardness and embarrassment that John had to face. But hey, that's just my guess.
That Tony Cheese is a sneaky little fucker. He most definitely had something to do with it. Probably even more so than Jacob.
During the United States title belt's absence, the Intercontinental Championship was created to take its place. This would see Kim Hwang becoming the first ever Intercontinental Champion at WWF's next house show, SmackDown. Jacob Cassidy would defend the United States title in RFW for years to come. During the collaborated event in 1991, Clash of the Champions, Jacob Cassidy had made an appearance as the United States Champion, facing Kim Hwang, who was the Intercontinental Champion. No winner was declared, as the match ended in a double count-out. At the sold-out and biggest event of the year, WrestleMania 3, Jacob Cassidy would eventually return, bringing the United States title belt with him and successfully defending it against Sokolov. This would see the United States title belt return to the WWF for good. After the 1988 event SmackDown and '89's main event, the WWF was growing in popularity and exposure. For the first time ever, John was presented with a live pay-per-view offer for $250,000, and it was scheduled to air on television 11th of July, 1990. The WWF crew had very little time to prepare. And just as all was going incredibly well, nobody had seen the impending disasters that were about to strike the hearts of all WWF talent and fans.
Coming soon to your homes, it's WWF 1997, the video game. Dominate the arena with your favorite superstars. Smash your opponent's skull into a steel cage. Play up to 4 players at the same time. Deliver high-flying moves off the top rope, or destroy your opponent with a steel chair. Play as your favorite legends such as Rick Deal and Dean Cooper, or play as any of the 30 superstars available. This summer, experience wrestling like you've never experienced before. View instant replays, perform real-life finishing moves, and create legendary matches that will live in your memories forever. WWF 1997, the video game, coming exclusively to the Nintendo 64.
In a shocking turn of events, professional local wrestler Turk Islihama was arrested earlier today for the alleged murder of his next-door neighbor in what authorities are describing as a cocaine-fueled rage incident. The incident took place last night at approximately 10:30 p.m., according to witnesses.
I could not believe what I was hearing. He was one of the nicest guys I'd ever known in the wrestling industry, and to hear what he did to that poor guy. Good Lord, man.
It was just a shock to everyone. A shocking and disturbing thing about someone you think you'd know by now. And to hear about that on the news, just even more shocking.
Cocaine, man. It really is a hell of a drug, and it will fuck you up, man. Turk was one of the sweetest guys I knew. It's such a shame we never had a chance to work together.
Turk Islihama was found guilty for murder and had received a life sentence in prison. Due to this incident, drug testing policies were forced prior to the upcoming Superstars event in 1990. Jax, Father Bruiser, Senor Blaze, Sean Lucky, Mike Rocker, Navajo Black and Franco Sanchez had all tested positive for drugs and were forced to depart the company. While most of these superstars would return to the WWF, Jax would later join RFW instead and would never return. On March 21, 1990, Senor Blaze had sadly passed away from a heart attack just months after getting clean. He was only 34 years old. On top of all that, Buddy Thorne would face a career-ending injury during a training session. He would never again step in a WWF ring. Buddy Thorne has respectively decided not to talk about it in this documentary. And lastly, just 1 week before the Superstars pay-per-view, Vice Vincent was diagnosed with a terminal illness and was forced to forfeit his tag team championship. His longtime friend Billy had taken his place, joining Chuck as the tag team champions.
I was more disappointed in not being able to wrestle, more than not even being able to live. I didn't know what to do with myself.
So what did you actually do? How are you still here today?
I knocked back all the surgeries and medications. I let the gods handle this one. And up until the day I returned, I was just living a normal life and trained harder than ever before. Then in May '91, I was suddenly cured. I can't explain it, sucker.
Miraculously, Vice Vincent, or better known today as Vice Flash, would return in 1991 at the first ever SummerSlam, teaming up with Bruce Tyler to form Blood Canada. To this day, Vice Vincent remains in greater health than ever before. The first ever WWF champion Lance Starr was set to face Rick Deal at the Superstars pay-per-view. Unfortunately, we would never see this dream match.
So after Rick Deal beat Buddy at main event, I was like, hey, so when am I going to get a chance to win this title back and become the star we both envisioned? We had merchandise lined up, you know, so we couldn't let it sit for too long. And his response to this day still breaks my heart.
I told Lance I'm sorry, but you're just not what I'm looking for in a star right now. Frankly, your arrogance is getting in my way, and I don't think you truly appreciate the amount of stress the company is going through at this point in time.
He told me he couldn't afford to pay me and asked me to sacrifice 35% of my salary. Why? Because he had heavily invested in merchandise for Rick Deal instead.
I had seen Rick perform shortly after acquiring my late father's company. He's the one that sparked the idea of expansion and profit, and the fans just absolutely loved him.
I looked John in the eye, and you know what I said? I said, fuck you, I'm leaving. So I called up my buddy James Lionheart, and he got me the job at RFW. And man, that place was a mess when I got there, but they were paying me loads more money than I had ever made before. And of course, I still made my appearances at WWF events because I understand at the end of the day, it's just business.
Although the WWF did face many losses leading up to the first ever pay-per-view, John Laurinaitis insisted that the show must go on.
Welcome everyone to the Superstars the young Vince McMahon. Cruise capacity crowd on their feet and cheering in anticipation of the action this week.
Wrestling's first ever televised event, WWF Superstars, had over 4,000 fans in attendance. It would prove to be extremely successful, selling over 1 million pay-per-views and over $600,000 in revenue just in merchandising.
We welcome you live to the King of the Ring tournament. Who will make history? Who will advance? Who will be crowned King of the Ring?
Following the success of the first ever pay-per-view, the WWF decided to create its next show, the King of the Ring. This event would feature an 8-man tournament, with the winner being declared the King of the Ring.
The first ever King of the Ring was an extraordinary event. I would have won if it weren't for my injury, but hey, what's done is done.
Winning the King of the Ring tournament had really put me over. Although the fans weren't too happy, Mr. Macho didn't care.
I created the King of the Ring tournament to establish a sort of hierarchy. As the tournament went on, that all went out the window. We all thought Dean Cooper was going to win, being the most experienced. Of course, experience and popularity means nothing in a King of the Ring tournament.
The King of the Ring would then become a very popular annual event. Over time, we would see King of the Ring winners Blake Saturn, two-time winner Chuck Diamond, Owen Rocker, and Bret the Hitman Hart.
The journey towards championship glory never ends. For every victory leads to new challengers, and every challenger leads to new obstacles. But some obstacles we never see coming.
The Raw and SmackDown teams squaring off across the ring from one another.
The following year, the WWF would collaborate with RFW to create the Clash of the Champions event, which would feature the best talent from both companies. RFW was aiming to gain more exposure, while the WWF was aiming to expand its current target audience.
Finally, the world will be able to see Lance Starr and Rick Deal face-to-face in the ring. The match we were supposed to see at WWF Superstars. But no, we would be a tag team. It was the most wasted opportunity I'd ever seen.
It truly was a clash of champions. It was the Intercontinental Champion versus the United States Champion. Tag Team Champions versus Tag Team Champions. World title holders uniting to face the ultimate heels of each company. It truly was a spectacular event.
与伟大的雅各布·卡西迪战斗是一种荣幸。我的家人非常喜欢这个节目。
Even though I was representing RFW at the time, I could not help myself but admire just how organized and professional the WWF were. Wow, what a great night.
Months later, the WWF was getting ready to fire up its most biggest event yet, WrestleMania. This event was heavily promoted throughout the entire world and received a lot of media attention, controversy, and praise, as it would feature the first ever women's match for the newly created women's title.
Has the WWF gone too far? Women are now expected to be competing in what is known as TV's most violent sport.
The WWF faces a lot of praise today in the equal rights for women movement, as wrestling will now feature women competing in what was previously known to be a man's sport.
I didn't need women's rights activists down my throat all the time. This was my decision to compete in a so-called man's sport. To win my first ever WWF title at the biggest sporting event in history is something I always dreamed of doing. I made that dream come true.
Even though Mr. Macho lost in the ladder match against Kim Hwang and didn't win the Intercontinental title, it can't be denied that this was the most amazing event ever.
I was only 18 years old, and here I was at WrestleMania. To this day, I still can't believe I was part of the biggest show in WWF history.
Going up against Dean Cooper again had me a bit nervous and off my game. I knew he'd been training hard, and well, it showed in the end when he beat me to become the WWF champion. The better man won that night.
I had my first ever title win at the very first WrestleMania. Words just cannot describe how that feels. While Rick and I had a few more matches over the years at WrestleMania 2 and my last match at WrestleMania 6, this was my absolute favorite.
WrestleMania remains to this day as the biggest sold-out event ever in the history of sports. It is still known today as the biggest yearly event. It is where stars are to be born and where stars go to resign. The success of WrestleMania led to massive profits, which meant the WWF could now hire even more talent. One of these soon-to-be recruits would change the business forever.
It's summertime, and the living is anything but easy, because it's time for SummerSlam!
As the WWF continued to dominate the pay-per-view shows with their next event, SummerSlam, the fans were only craving more. SummerSlam would further showcase the WWF's greatest technical wrestlers and new recruits. Merchandising sales had peaked at an all-time high.
From WWF superstar Vice Flash, his debut album, Funk the Flash, has taken the world by storm, featuring songs such as I'm Gonna Flash You,
I'm gonna flash you, I'm gonna flash you, I'm gonna flash you, I'm gonna flash you. Nothing you can do about flash you.
Also featuring the smash hit, Funk Your Flash.
Funk the Flash. Funk the Flash. Funk the Flash. I'm gonna funk your flash.
And also including the new hit single, Flash You One More Time.
Can I just flash you one more time? Please, please, don't deny. Don't deny. Stop calling the cops on me. Don't call the cops on him.
Vice Flash's new album, Funk the Flash, is in stores now.
It's time to rumble! It's time for the Royal Rumble, where it's every man for himself!
On January 26, 1992, the Royal Rumble match would make its first appearance at the next televised event, which would have the same name, the Royal Rumble.
The rules of the Royal Rumble are to eliminate the opponent over the top rope.
There will be 30 men in total, each entering the ring at 3-minute intervals.
And the last man standing gets a WWF title shot at WrestleMania.
And that last man standing at the Royal Rumble was me. I won the first ever Royal Rumble, eliminating my final opponent, Rick Deal.
In the main event, Dean Cooper would defend the WWF title against the most feared superstar, the Monster. With the Monster's brute force and unmatched aggression, it became evident that Dean's reign as the WWF champion was in grave jeopardy. The Monster would land a devastating chair shot and become the new WWF champion for the first time. The crowd was in disbelief.
WrestleMania 2, what the world has come to.
On the 26th of April, at WrestleMania 2, Chris Hammer would defeat the Monster to become the WWF champion for the first time. Chris Hammer was an instant success with the fans. His merchandise alone carried over 60% of the event's total revenue. The WWF executives announced Chris Hammer as the next big thing. At King of the Ring 2, Chris Hammer would defend the WWF Championship for the first time, winning against the first ever King of the Ring winner, Mr. Macho. This event would also see Blake Saturn defeating Kid Andy, Navajo Black, and Dean Cooper, winning the second King of the Ring tournament.
Welcome you to the grandeur
At the next event, SummerSlam 2, world record temperatures were at an all-time high. WWF superstars and all fans in attendance were advised to keep cool and hydrated, as the arena would get incredibly hot. Chris Hammer would face the Mastodon. Due to interference from Blake Saturn, this would be Chris's first title loss, and the Mastodon would become the WWF champion. This upset caused riots within the arena.
Following the end of last night's wrestling event, SummerSlam 2, a massive riot had broken out, leading to 48 people being injured and 3 people dead. Emergency services were quickly
Just absolutely devastating. My sincere condolences to the families who lost their loved ones that day.
我认识其中一名受伤者，他只是一个无辜的旁观者。
Bruce Tyler and I saw what was happening. We were trying to get past the crowds and ended up fighting some of the assholes in the riot.
I had never anticipated this ever happening. And why? Because I lost the WWF title? Was it seriously worth it? I wanted to quit the wrestling business that night.
We had to find a way to make sure this would never happen again. I told the Mastodon that if he beats Kim Hwang at the 1993 Royal Rumble, he must issue an open challenge, and that the challenger would pay him $500,000.
He didn't think anybody would accept, especially at that price. But he also didn't know that we gave Chris Hammer $500,000 so that he could accept the challenge and win the title back. We needed to make sure there wasn't going to be another riot.
The Royal Rumble match would once again see the WWF's top talent battle it out for a shot at the WWF title at WrestleMania. This year, it would be Dean Cooper remaining as the last man standing and would face Chris Hammer at WrestleMania 3. On March 4th, 1993, WrestleMania 3 would once again prove to be the biggest event of the year. Former tag team partners, Chuck Diamond and Billy, would compete against each other.
I had to discover myself in the WWF, and I didn't want to be bound in a tag team for my whole career. Disconnecting from Billy would be my first stepping stone.
The baby-faced heroes, Kim Hwang and Kid Andy, unite as a tag team and would emerge victorious.
我很喜欢和基德一起工作。他是一位令人难以置信的运动员，但现在他做出了加入 LWO 的错误决定。
The losing tag team of the match, the Cartel, would turn on each other and disband until they would reunite in 1996 as part of the Latino World Order.
We made a good team back then, and now we have united in the Latino World Order.
The ferocious Miss Kitty would defeat Lilith Jacksonville to become the new women's champion.
My first ever title loss was devastating. Miss Kitty beat me fair and square. After that, I had to train harder and get better for the next year so I could win my title back.
Former RFW superstars, the Rockers, would claim the WWF Tag Team titles for the very first time.
When Bruce Tyler and I lost to the Rockers, we were at least grateful that we lost to a worthy team.
After many years, Jacob Cassidy would return to the WWF with the United States Championship belt, also returning the belt to its rightful home.
The United States Championship had finally come home, and I'm glad Jacob Cassidy did the right thing in the end.
Mr. Macho would win the 2 out of 3 falls match against his bitter rival, Crusher.
He's a tough man. There was a reason why his name was Steel when he first started and evolved to being named Crusher. Strongest son of a bitch I know, inside and outside the ring.
The Mastodon would compete in his final WWF match against Blake Saturn, which would ultimately lead to the ring collapsing and needing reconstruction.
We were all afraid they were both seriously injured, and luckily they weren't.
I remember watching this match at home, and I just could not believe my eyes. It was the most epic thing I'd ever seen in a WWF ring.
And of course, the main event, Intercontinental Champion and Royal Rumble winner Dean Cooper would face the hero, Chris Hammer, for the WWF Championship.
When I saw that cage coming down in the middle of our match, I didn't know what to do. Chris didn't know what to do. We just let it all roll and we carried on.
We still don't know who was responsible for rolling down that cage. It was weird considering there were no cage matches that night, so why it was set up to begin with had me wondering if this was planned all along.
In this ultimate battle of the Titans, Dean Cooper would defeat Chris Hammer at WrestleMania 3, winning the WWF title for a second time.
To me, Dean Cooper was already a legend. I would give it my all that night. Unfortunately for me, it wasn't enough, and the better man won.
Going up against Chris Hammer for the WWF title was one of those visions I had when I first ever saw him. What an incredible athlete. No wonder why the fans absolutely loved him.
Dean Cooper would be the first WWF superstar to hold both, the Intercontinental and the WWF Championship at the same time. This concludes the WWF Documentary, Volume 1, 1988 to 1993. Thank you for watching. This has been a WWF paid presentation.
Feel like being one of the cool kids? Want that girl to finally notice you? Or do you need a good disguise to wear for when you rob your next liquor store? Want those bullies to finally stop picking on you? Get your official WWF merchandise now. Only available at WWFshop.com. Clothing may contain traces of dead cockroaches, mice, bats, snake venom, World War II veterans, Ebola, AIDS, plutonium, and human feces.